We see the National Guard in darkness contained. Once released, we are thrust into the zombie apocalypse made from our worst nightmares, not the gory kind, but the kind that means fighting for ready meals, pregnant youngsters screaming for help on the pavements, and a man yells for us to run. Then the National Guard steps in and the headshots begin. This is day 13 in Atlanta, Georgia. Just as soon as we are thrown into this world, we return happily to day 1. A young teacher, Katie Frank, takes her students on a field trip to a local hospital. Concurrently, Dr. Sanders finds herself in quarantine on one of the hospital's floors due to an unidentified illness. She recalls having recently come into contact with a patient from Syria who was unwell. Elsewhere in the city, we're introduced to Major Alex Carnahan and his partner Jana, who was once again, we're informed, folded at the last minute to move in with the Major. Alex attends a meeting about a potential flu outbreak. There are suspicions that the Syrian patient may have introduced a new virus to Atlanta, and quarantine measures might be necessary. Dr. Sabine Laumers addresses the police, discussing the epidemic threat but downplaying its severity. Teresa, a pregnant juvenile working in her mother's shop, is plotting to run away with her young partner Xander while her mother plans adoption visits. Katie's students perform for the patients, but she grows concerned when Dr. Sanders does not meet them. The attending doctor feigns ignorance about Dr. Sanders' condition, and Katie soon suspects something is amiss. As they are about to leave, the doctors announce that the children must stay longer due to a quarantine and a thorough health check. Dr. Laumers arranges a covert meeting with Alex, urging him to oversee the situation personally. She admits that while she has extensive experience, she has never encountered a virus like this. According to her, the threat extends beyond Atlanta and could impact the entire world. On-call officers are dispatched to the home of the Zero patient, believed to be the source of the outbreak. The officers, equipped with shields and gloves, advise the patient's relatives to take safety precautions. The man is in critical condition and is transported to the hospital despite attempts to flee. Katie discovers that her son Quentin and his friend Thomas are missing. She searches for them just as the Zero patient arrives. Katie notices the patient but refuses to leave until her students are found. Officer Jake Riley volunteers to help Katie. Together, they search for the boys and come across the bodies of Dr. Sanders and her partner. Recent news reports reveal that the situation has deteriorated, the Zero patient has died after a severe illness, and Dr. Sanders' fate has been confirmed. The police are alarmed by the fact that all of the immigrants' relatives are also infected, indicating rapid virus transmission and a fatality rate within 48 hours. Although it seems the situation might stabilize, Dr. Laumers announces an extension of the quarantine by 2 days, with no one allowed to leave the hospital early. During the briefing, Dr. Cannertz revealed that the virus had been identified and traces of the pathogen were found in the Zero patient's items, suggesting a deliberate infection attempt. Teresa arrives at the train station to depart for her boyfriend's relatives, but the train refuses to board new passengers and passes by. Learning that Jake is trapped in the hospital, Alex directly inquires with Dr. Laumers about the situation. She admits that a perimeter is being established around the area, which will be impassable for several days. By evening, panic ensues in the city. People are trapped behind an iron fence, separating many from their loved ones. Teresa realizes she and Xander are on opposite sides of the cordon and must decide on her next steps. Despite the precautions, the number of infections continues to rise. During the night, an autopsy is performed on the Zero patient, finding that the virus attacks all vital organs and kills within 48 hours of infection. With no known cure, the world faces a severe threat if a vaccine isn't developed soon. Alex manages to reach Jana, advising her to stay in a safe location. She locks herself in her office. At her mother's shop, Teresa calls Xander, informing him she is okay. Despite this, Xander vows to find a way to cross the dangerous barrier to reach her. Jana is joined by colleagues who also failed to leave the city. Meanwhile, Alex receives a warning to avoid bending the rules due to personal attachments. Jake is tasked with helping the doctor sort through the belongings of the infected to locate their relatives. While examining the Zero patient's phone, Jake discovers a troubling detail. A day before his death, the young man had been in contact with an unfamiliar blonde woman. Jake immediately reports this, prompting the department to dispatch a squad to find her. The police track down the blonde's address, but her parents claim she has been missing since the previous previous day. An emergency meeting is convened, and a directive is issued to locate the girl within hours. As Katie waits for the doctor, she listens to a news broadcast discussing the Zero patient and the doctors who contracted the virus from him. Noticing inconsistencies, Katie's concerns are interrupted by Dr. Cannertz, who reassures her that everything will be resolved soon and she and the children will be able to go home. Katie presses further about her suspicions, particularly why Dr. Sanders died before the Syrian patient who supposedly infected her. Jake is sent to find the missing girl, and the authorities attempt to keep the infected person's presence behind the cordon a secret. However, it is too late to save the blonde. The cops find her in critical condition at the apartment of old friends and transport her to the quarantine zone. Dr. Lammers confides in Alex that the virus is spreading faster than anticipated. Alex contacts Jana to reassure her, but omits the dire situation facing the city. Police are ordered to reinforce the cordon and use force if necessary. The number of symptomatic patients continues to rise at the hospital, with many being children. The facility is running out of beds, leaving few options for isolating the sick. Adding to the distress, Cannertz asks Jake to handle the cremation of bodies to prevent disease outbreaks. Another issue arises with Leo Green, a local journalist who continues to release alarming videos. Dr. Lammers instructs Alex to deal with Leo. Despite attempts to negotiate, Leo remains adamant that the authorities are concealing the truth. His latest video attracts the president's attention. Jana's colleagues realize they will run out of food before the quarantine ends and vote to risk a trip to the store, despite Jana's objections. Meanwhile, Teresa discovers her mother raising prices on essential goods to profit from the crisis. To provide some relief, Katie takes the children to the roof for fresh air. However, Thomas runs off and Katie finds him next to a sick man, indicating he is now infected. He is placed in isolation, and Katie feels responsible for not keeping him safe. She tells the doctor she promised Thomas's father she would care for him, but failed. The men return from the store with groceries, but Jana refuses to let them in after noticing her friend removed his gloves, risking virus contamination. A disgruntled customer, overcharged, brings friends to the store, leading to a raid. Jake arrives just in time to protect Teresa's mother. Katie discovers Thomas's isolation room is empty, and finds him at the hospital exit. Thomas's father refuses to leave him in the quarantine zone, and the doctors reluctantly allow the patient to leave. Alex's pleas fail to sway Leo, who continues his reckless pursuit of a sensational story, even allowing colleagues to leave the restricted area despite one exhibiting symptoms. Alex and Jake meet secretly and agree to collaborate, though both are anxious. Leo reveals how to escape the quarantined area to the public, causing chaos. The police are forced to open fire to control the rioting crowd, leading to fatalities. To prevent further disturbances, the government shuts down the internet and phone communication, stripping people of their last means of connection. Katie accidentally discovers a restricted room and learns the full extent of the outbreak, including the fate of her students. At the same time, Jana attempts to uncover the truth by assembling a radio phone to contact Alex. She climbs to the roof and finds a technician, Sam, hidden to avoid infection. Alex, now working night duty, spots an intruder and orders him to stop. The intruder turns out to be Xander, trying to reach his girlfriend. Alex fires a rubber bullet to apprehend him, and Xander is taken to the hospital. Alex visits Xander to apologize, but warns him that the same action will be taken if necessary in the future. Leo plans to exploit the situation by preparing a scandalous report on the abuse of power. The store is hit by robbers once again, putting Teresa in danger. However, unexpectedly, another gang intervenes, planning to exploit the quarantine situation for their gain. By the end of the day, Xander's room is found empty. The nurse reveals that he left with Leo, but Alex is unable to stop them. The duty officer reports that Xander has entered the quarantine zone. Dr. Cannertz shows Jake the rats injected with the experimental medicine. Unfortunately, one of the rats loses consciousness right before their eyes, dashing hopes for a quick solution. Jana manages to briefly call Alex, but the connection is cut off before she can learn anything significant. Leo inadvertently discovers the call and hints to Alex that he might be on the wrong side of the situation, and should reconsider his actions. Leo asks Xander to visit his friends and record a video message with them. Xander completes the task and throws the flash drive over the wall, but Leo discovers that the video contains evidence that Xander's friends are no longer alive. Xander finally finds his girlfriend, but their path is blocked by raiders. The general panic is exacerbated by a new crisis: hunger. Food supplies are dwindling, and the government must find a solution. As Katie walks down the corridor with her son, she encounters an old man who supplies lab rats to the hospital. She notices a discrepancy. She had seen Bert with the rodents before the quarantine began, but he denies it. Dr. Lammers asks Alex to organize a food delivery to the quarantine zone, but he is given a strict deadline of tomorrow without explanation. Alex turns to Jake for assistance. Early the next morning, food distribution begins, drawing hundreds of people. The store gang also gathers for the distribution, and their leader orders Xander to go with them. Jana ventures outside for the first time in days to get food. Jake recognizes Jana and gives her a food ration without waiting in line, also handing her Alex's keys and encouraging her to hang on, as the situation should resolve soon. Katie continues to question Dr. Cannerts about inconsistencies in the situation, but the doctor remains uncooperative, claiming he knows no more about the virus than she does. The distribution center is surrounded by the store gang, who outnumber the guards. The bandits seize the food boxes, planning to sell them to the hungry later. Alex is outraged that the leadership ignored his warnings, resulting in the food falling into the hands of criminals. Dr. Lammers downplays the issue, believing residents still have a chance to purchase food. A police officer, Paul, turns out to be infected, and Jake offers help, but he refuses and chooses to unalive himself. Returning to the shelter, Jana encounters other bandits who try to take her food box. She is saved by Sam, but due to her recent actions, Jana and Sam are denied entry into the office. Alex and Jake meet again, and Jake expresses his mistrust of the leadership. He confides that he had to leave his subordinate, Officer Meese, in the quarantine zone due to the robbery. Meese reports to Chief Besser that their plan was successful. Meanwhile, Jake tells Katie that she is right, something is being concealed. Thomas's sister is admitted to the hospital and asks Katie to find her brother. Their father has died, leaving Thomas alone. Alex also starts doubting the leadership's honesty and visits Leo's house to hear his perspective. He finds Leo drunk, but Leo sobers up and promises to assist in finding answers. Despite Jake's objections, Katie sets out to find Thomas. The very officer sent by Chief Besser, Officer Meese, offers the store gang a radio phone in exchange for joining their group. Katie doesn't find Thomas at home, but discovers her son Quentin, who follows her. Quentin reveals he knows where to find Thomas, and they head to the baseball field. Alex is tasked with removing a man from an empty house to prepare it for demolition. He spends considerable time discussing the lost past of the city. Teresa's mother aids the couple's escape, giving them a bag of baby supplies and advising them to wait in a safe place. The trio finds Thomas's belongings, but is surrounded by a mob of desperate individuals. Jake is forced to open fire to clear the area before they can continue searching for the boy. Katie finds Thomas near an infected person. Although frightened, Thomas insists he is not at risk of infection. Xander and Teresa seek shelter in Jana's office. Despite one colleague's objections, Jana lets them in. Thomas is placed in isolation, and Katie hopes he may have immunity that could be crucial in finding a cure. During their meeting, Alex gives Jake a flash drive containing a damaged file that could reveal crucial information if restored. Jana is the only one who might be able to repair it. In exchange, Alex receives a memory card with a message for the old man from the empty house. When Alex delivers the message, the old man is overwhelmed with emotion. Meanwhile, Teresa discovers a stolen radio phone among the baby supplies. As she and Xander are threatened by the phone's owner, who is armed and demands they come with him, Jake unexpectedly intervenes. He manages to coerce the bandit to leave. Alex notices a large group of people moving in an unknown direction, but cannot determine where they are headed. Jana tries to open the damaged file, but finds it too corrupted to salvage quickly. New guests arrive at the shelter, a gang seeking access to prohibited drugs. As the team begins to reinforce their defenses, the intruders find weak spots and manage to break in. Tony attempts to negotiate with them, but is killed when the gang leader attacks him with an axe. The intruders find their way inside, but one of them collapses at the entrance infected. Jana finally restores the file but has no time to review it before the power goes out and all doors lock. To restore power, Jana must leave the shelter and go downstairs. While she is gone, the bandits almost breach the elevator doors, but Jana manages to raise the switch just in time. On her way back, Jana takes the radio phone and contacts Alex. During their conversation, Alex hears Jana being attacked. Jana fights off her assailants and returns to the office, but the intruders continue trying to break in. Alex attempts to penetrate the closed zone to assist her, but is detained by National Guard soldiers. Jana orders everyone to take cover, and when the intruders burst into the office, Jake detonates an explosive device, a fire starts, rendering the attackers unconscious. However, one of the bandits revives and attacks Teresa's mother, who becomes infected. Alex is arrested, but Jana, unaware of this, asks Jake to call him and reassure him. Jana mentions that the bandit's phone had a government military number, and they need to investigate how it ended up in the quarantine zone. Teresa's mother, now infected, leaves. She apologizes to her daughter for her earlier refusal to accept her child. More than 48 hours have passed since Thomas's exposure to the infected, and the boy remains healthy. His DNA is being tested in rats to develop a vaccine. Dr. Kanertz reports his findings to the leadership, but his superior dismisses the idea of further experiments due to time constraints. Katie and Jake review surveillance footage and discover that the Zero patient was not an immigrant, but a man named Henry Burns, who met secretly with Dr. Sanders and seemed aware of his illness. Dr. Kanertz informs everyone that Thomas not only has immunity, but his body has defeated the virus, making it possible to develop a cure based on his DNA. Jana plans to lead her colleagues through ancient tunnels beneath a church to escape the cordon. Alex shares his findings with Leo, but the journalist cannot locate Henry Burns and suspects the Zero patient was deliberately sent to the hospital. Lammers returns Alex's badge and authority, but demands that he take Thomas out of the infected zone and hand him over to her for experimentation. Dr. Kanertz disagrees, but Lammers insists that only her lab can find a cure. Leo discovers that Burns received a package containing the virus 2 days before the epidemic began. He wants to find out who sent it, but Alex asks him to delay the investigation to complete his orders. As the colleagues work through the night to break through to the tunnels, Katie and Jake prepare to hand Thomas over to Alex. Dr. Kanertz realizes too late that the patient bitten by a rat injected with Thomas's DNA is infected, and the boy is an asymptomatic carrier. If Thomas leaves the cordon, the virus could spread throughout the city. Thomas is taken to the junction between the zones, where Alex and Dr. Lammers meet him. At the last moment, the transfer is cancelled and Thomas is sent back. Alex is left to figure out their next move, receiving a voice message from Leo claiming that Kanertz created the virus. Alex and Lammers are left in quarantine in the container between the zones. Thomas is returned to the clinic and quarantined while the team figures out their next steps. Jana and her colleagues return from their failed attempt to go underground due to gas buildup, only to find the office empty. Teresa and Xander have left in search of a safer location. On the main street, Xander notices a rally of protesters demanding to be released from the quarantine zone. Teresa thinks she saw her mother in the crowd and attempts to reach her, but Xander, worried for his pregnant girlfriend's safety, decides to investigate who she saw. Jake arranges a date with Katie, and they have a pleasant evening until Quentin bursts in, terrified. The boy says that Ray has taken the other children out of the hospital. Meanwhile, Xander realizes Teresa's sighting was mistaken, but encounters an infected person in the process. He narrowly escapes. As street riots escalate, Bert has his medicine box stolen and falls, while a squad is dispatched to the quarantine zone. Lammers tries to stop the captain, but he proceeds with several vehicles through the cordon. Jake locates Ray, who left Mary behind as she was showing symptoms. Katie ends up infected when she encounters her. At the hospital, Katie desperately tries to clean herself of the infection. Leo obtains crucial information, but discovers that Burns, the Zero patient, did not contact Kanertz but Lammers on the day of the infection. This revelation indicates that Lammers may have orchestrated the epidemic for her reasons. Susie, Jana's friend, confides that she is pregnant, and while Jana goes for a test, she meets Xander and Teresa on the street and convinces them to come back. Katie is placed in isolation, and Jake tries to support her, but the situation worsens. Dr. Lammers and Alex are released from quarantine after 48 hours. Only 8 hours are remaining in Katie's quarantine. At the same time, Teresa is about to give birth. Alex discovers from Leo that on the day of the infection, Burns contacted Lammers, not Cannerts. This implicates Lammers in the outbreak. Dr. Cannerts, upon leaving isolation, informs that Katie's symptoms have worsened, and 48 hours is no longer a sufficient guarantee of health. The soldiers who helped manage the riots are now infected, and Lammers promises to find a cure despite the mounting evidence of her wrongdoing. Alex asks Jake to inspect Leo's friend's apartment, where they find ashes, evidence of the destroyed documents. This leads Alex to suspect Lammers and the police chief's involvement. Susie's partner, Dennis, returns to the office showing signs of infection, but is denied entry. Susie lies and tells Dennis there was a mistake, and that she is not pregnant. Alex confronts the chief, revealing he knows the truth about Lammers, but Besser is unaware of Lammers releasing the virus. Jana and Susie struggle to help Teresa with her labor pains, but Jake arrives and supports them, assisting in the birth of Teresa's baby. Alex urges Leo to hold off on publishing material against Lammers until they have concrete evidence. Leo agrees to wait for 2 hours. Alex confronts Lammers, demanding her resignation. Despite Lammers' attempts to intimidate him, Alex remains resolute, and she promises to hold a press conference and step down. Teresa shows Xander their newborn daughter, who is placed in a makeshift crib. Jake shares this joyful news with Katie, though her delight is overshadowed by a worsening cough with blood traces. Lammers holds a press conference denying her guilt and claiming Dr. Cannerts accidentally released the virus. Cannerts continues his efforts to find a cure and agrees to test a serum derived from Thomas's blood on Katie. Bert, with a broken leg, retrieves his medicine box and heads home to his waiting wife. Cannerts, reeling from Lammers' betrayal, remains determined to save Katie. He administers the serum and explains how the virus infiltrated the clinic. Jana meets Bert and provides him with water and a cart to help him reach his wife. Despite the injection, Katie's condition deteriorates. She suffers from nightmares and anxiously awaits morning. To comfort her, Jake brings a TV. Katie and Jake spend the day together, but Katie's condition deteriorates further. She decides to confess her love to Jake, fearing there may not be another chance. Jana, in a conversation with her friend, reveals that Mies offered her a route to the healthy zone, but it's very expensive. Sam agrees to contribute his share, but only if Jana agrees to leave the others behind and go with him. Alex visits Leo's apartment, which is now empty. It appears Leo has given up on fighting Lammers. Later, Alex receives a pizza from a friend, which contains a note from Leo with an address and a key. As Katie's nearing death, Jake prepares to say goodbye. He puts on a protective suit, and when Katie falls to the floor, Jake holds her hand, trying to ease her suffering. Dr. Cannerts informs Jake that he can now say goodbye to Katie's body, which is awaiting cremation. For the first time, Jake can touch Katie's face without gloves. Jana informs the group about the potential escape route and suggests they find the money needed. Teresa refuses to leave, wanting her daughter to grow up a little. Alex arrives at the address Leo provided and discovers evidence that could help him bring Lammers to justice. Teresa, Xander, and their newborn daughter arrive at Bert's house, who is Teresa's grandfather. They plan to stay there until the end of the quarantine, but Xander insists they must leave when they find the shelves empty. Alex learns about Catherine Hops, whose son was involved with Lammers. From her, he obtains the address of a laboratory and heads there. As Dr. Cannerts works on creating a cure, news of his efforts spreads throughout the zone. A gang breaks into the clinic, wanting to harm the doctor, but Jake persuades them to protect Cannerts so they can be the first to receive the vaccine. Afterward, Jake decides to risk running through the cordon to save Quentin. Alex inspects the abandoned lab and uncovers solid evidence of Lammers' guilt. He confronts Lammers with this evidence, naming the True Zero patient who had been ill years earlier. Lammers admits to creating the virus, believing it was necessary for the country's safety. She asks Alex to focus on combating the virus, which has now spread beyond the cordon. An attack occurs at the hospital, and one of the gangsters becomes infected. Dr. Cannerts administers the test drug to him, hoping it will cure him, but the gangster succumbs to the infection. Jake prepares Quentin to cross into the healthy zone and promises to find him once everything is over. Jana's group readies to go underground to cross the cordon, but the army has assembled to prevent illegal crossings, and the tunnels are mined to be blown up. Alex tries to halt the destruction, realizing that people may be trapped in the tunnels, but the captain refuses to listen. Mies instructs Jana's group to prepare to descend into the tunnel. At the hospital, Dr. Cannerts attempts to create the medicine, but needs people with the same blood type as Thomas. Jake urges people to volunteer for the dangerous experiment, naming all the deceased in a moving speech. His appeal prompts people to get tested, hoping to find a match. Xander takes his family to Teresa's mother's store, where they plan to stay until the end. Dr. Cannerts identifies a local priest as a potential donor for the medicine. Bert mixes the last of his wine with powdered pills and toasts with his wife, preparing to end their suffering. Alex finds Jana and her group in the tunnel, but he is uncertain of what to do. As time runs out, Dr. Lammers orders the remaining tunnels to be destroyed. A sudden news break indicates that Leo Green has successfully beaten Lammers with audio clips of Lammers admitting guilt for the outbreak, making it onto the screens. Meanwhile, Alex refuses to let the group into the healthy zone, but returns with them to the quarantine area. The series caps off with Jake. He's come a long way and now has even come to terms with the loss of Katie. Releasing her ashes from the hospital roof, he tells the sky he loves her. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.